the government has come out and established for the record these are real. We are over the Rubicon on that. That has occurred in the last 3 years. The government has said UAPs are real. We have established a task force. We are providing a report to Congress. They're receiving classified briefings. This is whatever it is real.
Is it safe to say that because of AATIP and because of all those involved, that they have a general good idea of the physics behind these things and how they work?
I think it's safe to say that the leading theory is that all these observables, until we were trying to find the different exotic technologies that could explain that. It may very well be tied to the manifestation of a single technology. And if you have that technology and understanding of physics, all these observables are possible. I guess if there was any silver lining to this incredible enigma, is that we're beginning to realize that the physics, although advanced, aren't really breaking the laws of physics at all. They comport quite nicely to some of the models we see in quantum physics, and that ultimately, at the end of the day, these things, this phenomena, is still obligated to the laws of physics as we know them. They're not breaking the laws of physics. There just seems to be an understanding of quantum physics in a way that we haven't yet successfully been able to apply. Specifically as it relates potentially to Einstein's space and time. We now recognize that there are ways. Look, Mother Earth does it herself. Massive objects will warp space-time. We're all used to Newtonian physics. At the end of the Renaissance, Sir Isaac Newton proposes the physics that we're all very comfortable with: gravity, apple falling from a tree, force equals mass times acceleration, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, last century along comes this guy with crazy hair named Einstein, who proposes that there's actually a different model for the universe. And in fact, that Newtonian physics is true. There's an overlaying physics called relativity, where space-time is actually connected. They're not separate. And that space-time is flexible. You can compress it and you can stretch it. And in fact, mass does it. Mass perturbs space-time. And then, of course, 40 years ago, really, quantum physics begins to really come out and rock science on its heels. And the old analogy where you have this box and in walks a dog and out walks two cats 5 minutes later. And yet that's exactly what we're seeing with quantum physics. And it turns out that quantum physics has some very elegant solutions for perhaps some of the observables that we're seeing as it relates to the phenomenon.
Okay, so it's not like the light years away, technology that is thousands of years ahead of where we are now.
No, I don't think so. I think most scientists would agree that we're probably, at most 100 years, maybe significantly less. It's not that far away.
From what?
From being able to replicate that technology at a macro level.
So you're saying
at a usable scale.
Humanity as a whole could be, would be, will be replicating and using the technology observed in UFOs in their own lives?
I think, well, again, potentially within 100 years. There's people out there that will comb through every word I say and say, aha, see, he said this. So, I'd rather be a little conservative on the assessment, but given the current arc of our development and what we're doing and what we're learning and the advancements at the CERN Large Hadron Collider and whatnot, I think we're probably, within certainly a few generations.
Are you allowed to speak about, I spoke to Dr. Eric Davis, and one of the things he talks about is the warp bubble. And
that's right.
Okay, so, these things don't break the sound barrier essentially because they're not compressing air. At least what he says is that there is a warp bubble. Is that something you're familiar with?
I am. I'm certainly no expert. I am not a astrophysicist. My background is in science, but more in the biological areas.
At AATIP, yeah, did it come up that these things could be traveling inside, essentially,
yes,
using warp
yes,
bubbles?
yes. Let me just in the vernacular warp bubble, but there is a delta within the localized space-time construct compared to the external environment, in which a lot of the observations we see as seemingly extraordinary really aren't. They're rooted in some of the relativity principles that Einstein proposed, and that if you were inside this bubble traveling, what appears to us this incredible capability to maneuver at hypersonic speeds and instantaneous acceleration, and yes, even low observability. In fact, if you were inside that bubble looking out, the rest of the world will be going by in slow motion. And so it's not really, it's this weird duality where both are actually occurring, both our existence in this time and the relativity of being in this localized environment where you are insulated, where you're not, where the way we experience space-time is there's a delta, it's different.
What I'm trying to wrap my brain around is how does one come to that conclusion? I understand theory and theoretical physics and math on paper, but beyond videos, photos, eyewitnesses,
radar,
how else are you studying UFOs?
Well, that's a great question. You study it any way you can. It's very much like recreating the scene of an accident. Okay, so you may come up to an accident and you see two cars collided, but you don't know the circumstances in which the accident occurred. So you start collecting the evidence. You start talking to eyewitnesses. You get the telemetry from the vehicle itself and the accelerometers. Then what you do is you find some cameras that were on the street corner that actually saw the cars 5 seconds before they hit.
I got it.
Talk to people that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but in your analogy, you said the vehicle itself is part of the evidence. You go up to it, you look at it, you examine it. Was that happening with AATIP?
Oh, wow, great question. I got to be careful how I answer this. That was certainly would be preferred. The intent of AATIP was to try to collect as much and any information and evidence that was possible, period. Whether it was electro-optical or electromagnetic or whatever. And certainly material science is certainly a gold standard. If you can get a piece of material and you can look at it, not just its physical properties, but its molecular chemical properties and ultimately its atomic properties, you can ascertain whether or not something has been engineered or manufactured, or if it's part of the natural environment.
The task force report that is coming up, what are your suggestions for that to be a success? Meaning, not to me, but what are your general suggestions as someone who was on the inside for that to be a successful release?
So first of all, Steven, it takes in some cases longer to remodel a kitchen than to provide a 180-day report. The last time we had an intelligence failure of this country, a major one, which was 9/11, it took us almost 3 years to come up with the 9/11 Commission report. Okay, it takes a long time. Let's just go down the rabbit hole here for a second. Let's just assume this is some sort of adversarial or foreign technology that several decades now has managed to leapfrog us and evade all 18 members of the intelligence community, despite our best human intelligence, signals intelligence, imagery intelligence, yada, 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 right? That would be an intelligence failure that would eclipse just about anything else this country has ever faced, especially if this has occurred for decades, that there's a foreign adversary that can put a nuclear warhead within moments over Washington, D.C. Okay, that's a problem, and also interfere with our nuclear capabilities. So I don't think in June we're going to have a comprehensive threat report. I don't think realistic. I think what's realistic is that we have an interim report that satisfies the intent of Congress and says, look, here are the knowns. here are all the unknowns, and here's our plan to address those unknowns and come back to you with a comprehensive report, maybe in a year, maybe every year, right? And maybe rather than being this a task force construct, which most people don't know this, but a task force by government definition is a temporary activity. Maybe this needs to be an enduring capability. Maybe we need to have a whole of government approach. Maybe besides just DOD and the intelligence community, maybe we need Department of Energy. Maybe we need FAA and NOAA and Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy. Get everybody. Get the best and brightest in science and academia to come under the tent. Maybe get some of the universities to have a conversation about this and have a comprehensive, holistic approach to this rather than just a DoD or an intelligence community discussion. Maybe that's what's warranted.
What should the UAPTF? What should they tell the public right away? You know what they have. I know the truth. But what they have. You saw the research, the investigations out of those piles and piles and piles of stuff. What should be one of the first things the public knows?
Well, they already do. The government has come out and established for the record these are real. We are over the Rubicon on that. That has occurred in the last 3 years. The government has said UAPs are real. We have established a task force. We are providing a report to Congress. They're receiving classified briefings. This is whatever it is real. So I think that the task force has already succeeded in doing that. Now what they need to do is convince our elected officials and those that are serving us in the executive branch that a long-term enduring capability should be established that's properly resourced, not just a couple people on the side, trying to figure this out. A real whole of government comprehensive approach.
Yes, the Navy has said that the objects in these videos are unidentified aerial phenomenon. They remain unidentified. And we've had statements from the Pentagon saying unidentified aerial phenomenon. But I don't agree with you completely that they're taking it super seriously. I almost feel like this is a thorn in their side, an inconvenience. Is that accurate?
No, you're right. I never said that. Look, they're taking it seriously, but they can take it more seriously. It is a thorn in their side because they don't have a solution. And that's a problem. When you are in the role of national security, you are paid to have solutions and offer solutions, not problems. And we don't have any solutions yet. And so it is a sticky situation. It is a thorn in the side of many people. I had to pay personally the consequences of that. I had some people in the government that did not like me coming out and having this conversation, and they went after me, and they are continuing to try to cause problems for me. It is a problem because you're forcing them to address an issue that they didn't want to address, and furthermore, they spent decades saying wasn't real.
Okay. So, how did they come after you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've had investigations launched against me. I had people try to come after my security clearance, and fortunately, I had enough supporters in the Beltway and in government that knew who I was, and they knew the truth. And so, for those who tried to come after me for retribution and for whatever reason, it became very apparent that I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't violate my non-disclosure agreement. I didn't talk about classified information, and what I was talking about was true. And so they were forced to back down, but they still continue to some degree. Whenever they have an opportunity, they think they can get away with it by trying to put, sow seeds of doubt in the American public about AATIP or what I did or what the program did. That's just obfuscation. I'm really less worried about it now because we've come so far, and people have spoken out for the record about what AATIP was and what my role was, and there's documentation that frankly that exists. So, I'm less concerned about that now.
How I can't wrap my brain around how something remains unidentified that long. I mean, you listed it could be, for example, going down the rabbit hole, a foreign adversary has created this, right? So let's put that up there, China or Russia, or let's say it's extraterrestrial, it's aliens, right? Either one of those for the Pentagon to keep coming out and saying it's unidentified aerial phenomenon for decades. I mean, why do you think these things keep getting labeled? What's taken so long? If
Oh
stuff's
my
flying over
goodness.
our airspace,
Yeah.
what's going on? What's up with the
Well,
Pentagon?
first of all, we never reported it. We were told not to report that stuff. And if you did, you might be taken off flight status. You'd have your security clearance in jeopardy. So that's the reason why. Because after Blue Book, they said, listen, don't bring this topic up again. We don't want to hear about it. And if you do, be prepared for the repercussions. That's changed. Now there's actually reporting requirements where our brave men and women in uniform are required to report this. But that's only recent. That wasn't the case. And so I think it's, especially from a national security construct, imagine you're the Secretary of Defense and I'm working for you. And I come to you and I say, hey, boss, you got a minute? Listen, there's something in our airspace. We don't know what it is. We don't know how it works. We have no idea who's behind the wheel or what the intentions are. Oh, by the way, there's not a damn thing we can do about it. There you go. Now, your reaction to me as a Secretary of Defense is going to be, what? Well, we're paid to have answers. Go find an answer. Well, okay, sir, then I need a budget. And sir, I need authority and I need resources. I need manning and I need money and I need, all the things that come along with that. And then, oh, by the way, people are going to say, well, what are you spending money on? Well, I'm spending it on UFOs. You're what? Whoa, what? You're spending my taxpayer money chasing UFOs? Yep, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
So you can see how that gets into a difficult conversation and why it's important that we remove the taboo and the stigma that's been associated with this, and have the discussion. I read a really interesting post not too long ago on Twitter where someone says, the only ones who say they know are fools and charlatans, right? And this topic has historically been chock full of some people that have been taking advantage of people for a long time. And that's part of the problem. They all think they have the answer. They all think they know. Oh, we know it's from the Pleiades or Alpha Proxima, or they're good, or I can come here, I can summon them for you while I pay someone to drop flares out of an airplane. There's all sorts of characters out there that have made a cottage industry on this. And it's damaged the credibility of the topic. That's why no one in the media for years wanted to even touch this topic, because it's frankly was considered fringe for so long.
You were not into you were an intelligence officer, knew nothing about UFOs. You were given this assignment and worked at the Pentagon. Tell me about your emotions. A military guy who's been around the world working in intelligence. Tell me your emotions when you started to see real evidence of the reality of UAP. How did you feel?
I probably should. I won't curse here. It was a holy smoke moment, and not holy smoke because, oh my gosh, it's real. It's, well, crap. Now we have to do something about it. Now that we know it's real, how are we going to have this conversation with people that we've been telling for decades it's not real, nothing to see here? How do you take a train, a locomotive, or an aircraft carrier that's got so much weight and inertia behind it, and now make it to 180 degrees and say, oh, just kidding. Actually, they're real. There's something to see here. That for me was kind of, and selfishly, of course, because it's kind of that moment you're like, oh my God, how in the hell are we going to do that? How do I go to my boss and tell my boss, look, boss, it's real,
Okay. So you said holy shit or holy smoke. So your emotional reaction was one of like surprise and fear. Would that be accurate?
Concern, because now we are behind the power curve. We know that foreign adversaries and other countries are equally interested in this topic. And so now my question goes to, oh man, how far behind are we? Right. And so there comes the real problems from a national security perspective. I mean, yes, the idea itself is it's a big topic and a lot to think about, but my focus was always national security. I'll let the philosophers, talk about what this means to humanity. My focus focus was, what does this mean to national defense? And what
Was
does this mean
UAP
to...
was UAP is UAP a threat?
Well, depends how you define it. If I, as I told you before, if I stick my head behind the jet engine of a 747 as it's powering up, is that a threat? Well, it's not intending to be a threat to me, but yeah, it's a threat to my health, to my biology. If you have these UAPs that are coming in and around civilian aircraft, where now it's a flight safety issue, yeah, that's a threat. Now, it may not be an existential threat, but it's still a threat. I mean, if my family was on that plane and got buzzed by a UAP, I'd be pretty pissed, And oh, by the way, nobody wants to report it. Well, that's not your call. You should report it because it's their safety issue. Now, let's put that into the context of what I've always talked about. And I know people, keep telling me, well, you need to have a new analogy, Lou, but it's the one that works. Is this a national security threat? The bottom line is we don't know. And it goes back to the whole, analogy I use about muddy boot prints. At night, you go, and before you go to bed, you lock your front door, you lock your windows, you turn on your alarm. Even though we all live in safe places, no one expects anything bad to happen. But let's say one morning you wake up and come down to have a nice cup of coffee or tea, and there's muddy boot prints now in your living room carpet that weren't there the night before. Now, no one's been hurt, nothing's out of place, nothing's been taken. But despite you locking the doors and the windows and turning on the alarm, there are muddy boot prints now in your living room that weren't there the night before. The question to you is that a threat? Well, my answer is it could be if it wanted to be, so we should probably figure it out. And so that's probably the way I would answer that question.
When human beings first saw fire, horses were first witness to new technology in some pockets of the world historically, there was this like fear of, oh my God, where did this come from? Is this from heaven? Did the gods send this? There was fear and confusion. If the world is really on the cusp of learning about the existence of something extraordinary, even if it's always been there, what would be your suggestion to those watching this interview to mentally prepare for that?
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm not sure we will ever be prepared. But that doesn't mean we should know the truth. We should. But how does one prepare for a global pandemic? How does one prepare for the idea that weapons of mass destruction are being proliferated? How does one prepare for climate change? How does one prepare for, all these things? There are still people that believe the moon causes illness. There are people that listen to thunder and they don't understand it's related to lightning. They think it's something supernatural in certain parts of the world. It's hard to bring humanity as a whole. Progress is hard, but it's also inevitable. It's also what we are as a species. And I'm not sure if we'll ever truly, quote unquote, be prepared for anything. But I think it's part of the human condition. We are a very resilient, a very adaptive species, and I think it's okay. I think that is, at the end of the day, that's what nature is. A lot of the rules and confines that we establish as a species are artificial. They're not even real. They're fake, and we do that to help us live, to reconcile that we are a species hurtling in the vastness of space on this little tiny rock we call Earth. We set up organizations and institutions and rules and laws so we kind of know where we are, but we really don't. At the end of the day, we're all equally lost. And so I think this topic is no different. I also see a lot of opportunity here. Imagine if we had the ability to develop 1 million years worth of human evolution in one generation. How incredible would that be? Now, are we ready for it? I don't know. Are we ready for the weapons that we have and use against each other? Probably not. But here we are.
To a layman, someone who is just coming off the street, doesn't really know anything, to hear the government say UFOs are real, they're going to say, oh, okay, unidentified flying object. They just don't know what it is yet. It could be anything. It could be a balloon. Unidentified, I think a lot of people go to balloon or drone. Can you push them further real quick beyond that?
Actually, I think it's okay for them to think that because it gets them having the conversation. If it's easier for them to digest this topic initially, to speculate that there's some sort of adversarial technology, whether balloons or drones, I don't see the harm in that. I think that's okay because ultimately the data is the data, and the data is going to lead them to whatever conclusion it does. I know people are frustrated, but I don't think we need to have any preconceived narrative of something. The beauty about the data is that it speaks for itself. And so, if to have this conversation, look, this is a big tent, and we've got room for all sorts of people. We're now having the conversation, and if it's more palatable for people to start the conversation by saying there's probably drones and balloons that we don't know, okay, that's fine. Because at some point you're going to get to the conversation, say, well, the wind was 120 knots. Balloons don't sit still in the high winds, right? Or that these things were, well, okay, if it was a drone, then how was it on station for 4 hours and hovering? Because propeller drones can't do that. Fixed wing drones can do that, but they have to be moving. They can't just stay in one place. So all that's fine and dandy. I'm not sure I'm necessarily opposed to that part of the conversation because again, it gets people to have the conversation and recognize it's true. At the end of the day, the data is the data. The truth is the truth, and that's going to lead them ultimately to whatever conclusion it does.
One last request I have of you, and then I'll let you go. Is there anything you could share with me without breaking or breaching your NDA that you haven't shared yet with anyone?
Pay attention for the next 30 days. I think this conversation is about to get real interesting.
One more nugget. Anything on that? What do you mean? What do you mean?
That's about all I can say. Just so far my predictions have been accurate. When I said a few years ago, next year we're going to have a fundamentally different conversation, and we did. And then the next year I said the same thing. And this is a process, not an event, and we are we're taking this topic very seriously. And go ahead, please.
Within the next 30 days, the conversation's going to change?
I think it's going to be bolstered. I think more people that have not been part of this topic will probably begin to ask questions.